A week before my son's wedding, I overheard a conversation that changed everything. I had spent months planning, cooking, and preparing for Marcus and Tiffany's big day, believing I was giving them the best gift a mother could, my time, love, and effort. But what I heard that afternoon broke something inside me. I was in my kitchen, surrounded by notes, recipes, and shopping lists for the buffet I had promised to prepare. I was calculating how many dishes I could make on my budget when I heard voices outside. Tiffany was in the garden talking to her friend on the phone. At first, I ignored it, but then I heard my name. "Oh, don't worry about the kids," she said, laughing softly. "Marcus's mom will handle them. She's basically agreed to babysit the whole group. There'll be like 15 children, but she loves that kind of thing. It'll keep her busy and out of the way." Her friend chuckled. "You're making her the babysitter at her own son's wedding?" "Well, she's old. She likes to help, and it's not like she'll notice," Tiffany replied. "Besides, it saves us from hiring anyone. Free childcare and free catering. Not bad, right?" I froze. My hands trembled as I listened from behind the kitchen window. My heart sank deeper with every word. I had offered to cook, decorate, and help organize everything because I wanted to make the day special. I wasn't some free service or convenient babysitter. I was a mother, a grandmother, a person. I spent that night thinking. 72 years of life had taught me one thing: people only treat you the way you allow them to. I had always been the one to say yes, to take care of everyone, to smile even when I was exhausted. But this time, I decided to say no. So, a few days before the wedding, I called the caterer and canceled my orders. I returned the rented decorations. I didn't say a word to Marcus or Tiffany. I simply made a new plan. On the morning of the wedding, my phone rang nonstop. It was Marcus. "Mom, where are you? The buffet isn't here. Tiffany says you were supposed to bring everything." I smiled, sipping my coffee calmly. "Oh, sweetheart," I said softly. "I decided not to come. I heard your plans about me being the babysitter, so I thought I'd let someone else handle it. I needed a little rest." There was silence on the other end, followed by panic. "Mom, please. You can't be serious. We're counting on you. You're counting on using me, Marcus," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I've done enough for one lifetime. I love you, but I won't be treated like help. I wish you both a wonderful wedding." And I hung up. I spent that afternoon at my favorite cafe, reading my book and enjoying a slice of lemon pie. For the first time in years, I did something just for myself. Later, I heard from my cousin that the wedding had been chaotic. The caterer they hired last minute arrived late, the food wasn't enough, and the children ran wild through the reception hall. Tiffany cried, and Marcus tried to calm her down while guests whispered about the mess. I didn't feel proud of their struggle, but I did feel peaceful. They finally learned that kindness is not weakness, and love should never be taken for granted. When Marcus visited me a week later, his eyes were full of regret. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he said. "I didn't realize how much you were doing for us. Tiffany and I were wrong." I placed my hand on his and smiled. "It's all right, dear. Sometimes people need to fall to understand the value of what they had. I hope you both learned something important." He nodded. "We did." And from that day forward, they never took me for granted again. Sometimes, the hardest lessons are the ones that teach people how to see you, not as someone to use, but as someone to respect. Over 50 years, Loretta had seen me through everything: my husband's passing, Marcus's growing up, even the lonely nights when I thought my family didn't need me anymore. When she picked up the phone, her warm, raspy voice brought back a rush of comfort. "Charlotte, you sound upset." "What's wrong?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "Loretta, I just found out my son and his fiancée plan to use me as a babysitter during the wedding. 15 kids. All night. While I cook, decorate, and pay for half the food. Loretta let out a sharp gasp. They didn't. Oh, they did. I replied, my voice steady but bitter. And they didn't even have the decency to ask. They just assumed I'd do it, like I'm their help, not family. There was a long silence before Loretta spoke again, her tone sharper now. Well, honey, you've always been too kind. Maybe it's time to remind them who they're dealing with. And that's when the idea started forming, small at first, like a whisper. But by that evening, I had a plan. The next few days, I went on as if everything was perfectly normal. I continued talking about the menu, the decorations, and even showed Tiffany the floral arrangements I'd picked. I wanted her to think I was the same naive woman she'd underestimated. Meanwhile, Loretta and I worked behind the scenes. She knew a local caterer who could take over my buffet plans at the last minute, for a fee, of course. I called and arranged for them to deliver the food directly to the venue, but under a different name. The contract was in Tiffany's, and she'd receive the bill once the event was over. Then I quietly canceled all my personal orders and took the $3,000 I'd saved for ingredients and booked myself a weekend getaway at a cozy bed and breakfast 2 towns over. A peaceful little place with no noise, no family drama, and no screaming children. On the morning of the wedding, I packed my small suitcase, watered my plants, and left the house without telling anyone. I turned off my phone for a while, not out of cruelty, but out of self-respect. Around noon, I turned it back on. Dozens of missed calls. Marcus, Tiffany, even Audrey. The messages came one after another. Marcus ***, Mom, where are you? The buffet people are saying there's a mix-up. Tiffany ***, Miss Charlotte, please call me. The kids are running wild and no one's here to help. Marcus again ***, Mom. The caterer says they need payment up front. Did you cancel something? What's going on? I smiled and sent one simple message back. I heard everything you said last week. I'm not your babysitter or your unpaid help. I hope you both have a wonderful wedding. Love, Mom. Then I put my phone away and ordered another cup of tea. Later that evening, while soft jazz played in the background, I sat by the window of my inn, looking out at the sunset. I thought of Marcus, my boy who had once cried in my arms after scraping his knee, who had promised to always take care of me when I grew old. Somewhere along the way, he had forgotten who I was to him. But maybe now he would remember. The next morning, Loretta called me laughing. Oh, Charlotte, you should have seen their faces. The caterer demanded payment before serving. The guests waited an hour for food, and those kids nearly tore the place apart. Tiffany was in tears, and Marcus looked like a lost child. I didn't laugh. I just sighed. I never wanted to ruin their day, Loretta. I just wanted them to respect me. They will now, she said softly. You taught them a lesson no one else could. A few days later, Marcus showed up at my door. He didn't speak for a moment. He just stood there, his eyes red and tired. Mom, he whispered, I'm sorry. I looked at him, this grown man who had once been my little boy. I know you are, I said gently. Just remember, love isn't about what people can do for you. It's about how you treat them when you think they'll do it anyway. He nodded, tears in his eyes. Tiffany and we learned that the hard way. I smiled faintly. Good. Then my lesson wasn't wasted. And that night, as I sat by the fire knitting a small blanket for my newest grandchild, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Because sometimes you have to walk away from those you love just long enough for them to realize what you're really worth. The lake. What's that? She asked, sipping her drink. That I finally chose myself, I said softly. For 72 years, I've lived for others. My husband, my son, my grandkids, my friends. But today, I'm living for me. No one's calling my name. No one's asking for a favor. It's just peace. Loretta smiled. About time, Charlotte. You've carried everyone long enough. Let them stand on their own for once. We toasted to that, to peace, freedom, and a little well-deserved payback. By evening, I was soaking in the jacuzzi with lavender bubbles and soft music playing in the background. The golden light of sunset danced on the water, and for the first time in years, I felt completely at ease. Then I turned on my phone. It exploded with missed calls and messages. Marcus had called at least 20 times. Tiffany had left a few frantic voicemails. Marcus ***, Mom, where are you? The caterers say everything's canceled. People are arriving soon. Please call me. Tiffany ***, Miss Charlotte. We don't know what happened. The kids are running everywhere. We can't find anyone to watch them. Marcus again ***, Mom, please. The buffet isn't coming, the florist canceled, and everyone's asking questions. What's going on? I didn't answer any of them. I simply turned the phone back off, took another sip of my wine, and smiled. Meanwhile, back in the city, chaos had erupted. Guests were arriving to an unfinished hall, hungry and confused. The children, all 15 of them, were running wild between tables, spilling juice and crying. Tiffany's perfect wedding photos turned into a collection of blurry moments filled with frustration and tears. By the time they managed to hire a last-minute caterer, the food was late and cold. Marcus was exhausted, Tiffany was furious, and everyone whispered about the unorganized wedding. That night, as the stars shimmered above the lake, Loretta and I sat by a fire pit wrapped in soft blankets. Do you think they've learned their lesson yet? She asked with a smirk. Oh, I'm sure they're starting to, I replied. But the real lesson will come when they read my letter. The next afternoon, after a long breakfast and one last spa treatment, we packed our bags and drove home. I felt lighter, freer, and strangely proud of myself. When I arrived, Marcus's car was already parked in my driveway. He was sitting on the porch, looking defeated. In his hands was my letter.
He stood up as soon as he saw me.
Mom, his voice cracked. I read your note. I nodded calmly. I figured you would by now. He hesitated, his eyes glistening. We were wrong. Tiffany and we treated you terribly. I didn't realize how much I was taking from you without ever asking what you wanted. I sighed softly. Marcus, I raised you to be kind and grateful. I don't know where I went wrong, but I needed to remind you that love isn't servitude. I would have done anything for you if you'd just asked me, not used me. He lowered his head. You're right. Tiffany feels horrible too. She's been crying since last night. We both learned our lesson, Mom. We're so sorry. I placed a hand on his cheek. I know, son. I forgive you. But I hope you remember this moment the next time someone gives you their time and love. It's not free, it's given. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I will, Mom. I promise. Later that evening, after he left, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. The air outside was cool and still. I thought about everything. The years of giving, the pain of being taken for granted, and the quiet joy of finally choosing myself. I smiled, not out of revenge, but out of peace. For the first time in my life, I realized that dignity isn't something others give you. It's something you decide to keep, no matter who tries to take it away. Music starting too early and someone shouting for napkins. Then Tiffany finally spoke, her voice trembling with frustration. Charlotte, please, you're ruining everything. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? People are asking where the food is, the kids are running wild, and Marcus is losing it. I let out a quiet sigh. Tiffany, I didn't ruin anything. You did that yourself the moment you decided to use me instead of respect me. You made a plan, remember? The one where the old lady would take care of all the children so you could enjoy your night in peace. Well, sweetheart, I made my own plan. Charlotte, please, this isn't fair, she cried. You're punishing Marcus too, and he didn't. Oh, no, Tiffany, I interrupted gently. Marcus may not have said those cruel words, but he allowed them. He assumed I'd do whatever was asked of me, like I've always done. I love my son, but love doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. There was nothing but noise after that. More shouting, a clatter of dishes, someone calling for help. I smiled and said softly, I hope the wedding is still beautiful, Tiffany. And remember this, every choice has its consequence. Enjoy your evening. Then I hung up. Loretta had been watching me the whole time from across the terrace, her glass of wine halfway to her lips. Well, she asked. I leaned back, closing my eyes as the breeze brushed against my face. They're learning, Lo. The hard way, but they're learning. Loretta grinned.
Good.
Now stop thinking about them and enjoy this place. You earned it. We spent the rest of the afternoon in complete bliss, massages, laughter, a quiet dinner by candlelight. That night, as I lay in bed with the scent of lavender filling the air, I thought about the chaos that must be unfolding at that very moment. And for the first time in years, I felt no guilt.
Just peace.
The next morning, I woke up refreshed and happy. Loretta and I had a long breakfast overlooking the lake before heading back home. When I pulled into my driveway, Marcus's car was already there. He was sitting on the porch steps, his suit wrinkled, his tie loose, and his eyes red from exhaustion. Mom, he said quietly as I stepped out of the car. Marcus, I replied calmly, closing the door. You look tired. He gave a tired laugh. You could say that. The wedding was chaos. The kids destroyed 2 centerpieces, the guests complained about the food, and Tiffany cried through half the reception. I'm sorry to hear that, I said softly, though the tone of my voice made it clear that I wasn't really sorry. Maybe next time you'll remember to ask for help instead of assuming it. He looked down, his shoulders slumping. Mom, you're right. I should have talked to you. I should have known better. Tiffany feels terrible. We both do. We were wrong. I studied him for a moment, the same way I used to when he was a little boy who'd broken a vase and was too afraid to admit it. Marcus, I said finally, I love you. But you need to understand something. I'm not just your mother. I'm a person who deserves respect, not orders disguised as gratitude. He nodded slowly, eyes filled with remorse. I know. I promise it won't happen again. Good, I said with a faint smile. Now go home to your wife. You both have a lot to talk about. As he walked back to his car, he turned and looked at me one last time. Mom, thank you for teaching me this, even if it was the hard way. I waved him off gently. That's what mothers do, son. We teach lessons even when they hurt. That night, I sat in my favorite chair by the window with a cup of chamomile tea. The house was quiet, and the evening breeze carried the scent of the roses blooming outside. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the chaos, the peace that followed, and I smiled to myself. Sometimes, the only way to make people appreciate you is to stop being available. And from that day forward, Marcus and Tiffany never took me for granted again. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the spa room window, soft and golden, warming my face. I hadn't slept so deeply in years. For the first time, I woke up without an alarm, without a list of chores waiting for me, and without guilt. Loretta was already up, sipping her coffee on the balcony. "Morning, Freedom Queen," she said with a grin. "Morning, Lo," I replied, stretching. "Did you sleep well?" "Like a baby." "Though I did dream about Tiffany chasing a food truck in her wedding dress," she laughed. I chuckled too, but part of me wondered how things had really gone. Had they managed? Did Marcus and Tiffany figure something out? Then, almost instinctively, I reached for my phone but stopped myself. "No," I said aloud. "Not today." Loretta raised an eyebrow. "That's the spirit." We spent the morning walking by the lake, breathing in the crisp air that smelled of pine and possibility. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, like an old sweater that fit just right. I realized I didn't need noise or plans or approval to feel alive. I just needed peace. After breakfast, my phone buzzed again. This time I looked. 6 new messages from Marcus. One from an unknown number. I hesitated, then opened his first. "Mom, I don't know what to say. The wedding was a disaster. Tiffany's furious. The guests left early and people are talking. But maybe that's what needed to happen." Another message. "I've been thinking all night about what you said. You were right. I've taken your help for granted for too long."
I'm sorry.
Then one more. "Tiffany wants to apologize too. She said she understands now." I don't know if she really does, but it's a start. The message from the unknown number read simply, "Mrs. Fitzgerald, this is Audrey. I owe you an apology. I said terrible things. I'm truly sorry." For a moment, I didn't know how to feel. Anger? Satisfaction? Forgiveness? Maybe a little of each. I turned to Loretta and handed her the phone. "What do you think?" She read the messages, then shrugged. "Looks like your lesson landed, Charlotte. Whether you forgive them or not is up to you, but at least they finally see who you really are." I smiled softly. "I think I'll forgive them. Eventually. But not today. Today's still mine." Loretta raised her glass of orange juice. "To boundaries." I lifted mine. "To being seen." As we clinked glasses, I realized something. Peace doesn't erase pain, but it replaces it with power. And that was worth every minute of the chaos that led me here. "Mom." Marcus's voice trembled. "Please don't do this. You're right, okay? You're right. I should have talked to you. I should have said thank you 100 times for everything you've done. I thought you'd want to help. You always do." "Exactly," I said quietly, though every word carried the weight of years. "I always do. And you never ask. You just assume." There was shuffling on the other end, people talking, a child crying again, someone calling for Tiffany. The sound of chaos, the kind of chaos I'd spent my whole life cleaning up. "Marcus," I continued, my tone firm but calm. "I love you. You're my son. But love doesn't mean servitude. It doesn't mean I exist to make your life easier whenever you snap your fingers." He tried to respond, but his voice cracked again. "Mom."
I didn't mean for it to sound that way.
"We just thought." "You thought I'd say yes." I cut in, because that's what I've always done. But that's over now. There was silence, long, heavy silence, broken only by the faint sounds of a wedding gone terribly wrong. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I really am. I didn't realize how much I was taking you for granted until now." I exhaled softly, looking out over the lake. The sunlight shimmered across the water, warm and endless. "I believe you, Marcus. And I forgive you, but I won't fix this for you.
This is your day.
You and Tiffany can handle it. You're both adults." He said nothing. I could almost hear the shame in his quiet breathing. "I'll tell you something, son," I added. "Sometimes the best gift a mother can give is to stop making life so easy. Maybe that's how you'll finally learn. Before he could reply, I hung up the phone. Loretta grinned from her chair, clapping softly. That, she said, was a masterclass in boundaries. I laughed, the tension finally breaking. You think so? Oh, absolutely. You didn't just draw a line. You built a wall, painted it coral, and hung a do not disturb sign. We both burst into laughter, the kind that shakes the soul loose from years of exhaustion. As the sound faded, I leaned back in my chair and looked at the lake again. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone else to need me. I wasn't planning, fixing, cleaning, or cooking. I was just being, and it felt extraordinary. The evening, as the moonlight began to shimmer across the lake, my phone buzzed again, this time with a video call from Marcus. Loretta raised an eyebrow. You going to answer? I hesitated for a moment. Yes, I said finally. It's time. When I accepted the call, the camera showed Marcus sitting alone in a dimly lit room, his suit jacket off, his tie loosened, and his eyes red. Behind him, I could see what looked like the aftermath of a battlefield. Empty tables, plates with half-eaten pizza, wilted flowers, and a few people awkwardly saying goodbye in the background. Mom, his voice cracked. The wedding's over. I figured, I said calmly, leaning back in my chair. How did it go? He laughed softly, but it was the kind of laugh that comes before tears. It was a disaster. Half the guests left early, the kids were out of control, Tiffany had a meltdown, and her dad nearly fainted when he found out there was no buffet. I nodded slowly. Well, that sounds educational. He gave a small, shameful smile.
Yeah, it was.
Mom, I'm sorry. For everything. I don't know what I was thinking. I guess I just took you for granted. Not just me, I replied gently. You took love for granted. Real love, the kind that doesn't ask for anything in return. But even love has limits, Marcus. He rubbed his forehead. I know. And Tiffany knows it too. She's embarrassed. She told me to tell you she's sorry, even if you don't want to hear it. I sighed. It's not about hearing it, son. It's about seeing it. Words are easy. Change takes time. He nodded silently, his eyes downcast. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched, not hostile this time, just honest. Mom, he said quietly, will you come over tomorrow?
Please.
Not to fix anything.
Just to talk.
I don't want to lose you over this. I studied his face, the boy I raised, now a man learning one of life's hardest lessons. I'll think about it, I said finally. Right now, I'm going to finish my spa weekend. I deserve that much. He nodded, wiping his eyes. You do. You really do. Good night, Marcus. Good night, Mom. I love you. I love you too, son. But remember, next time, show it. When I hung up, Loretta was watching me with a soft smile. So, she asked. He's learning, I said. Slowly. The hard way. She raised her glass again. To lessons learned. I smiled, clinking mine against hers. To finally being seen. That night, as I sank into the soft bed with the scent of lavender in the air, I felt lighter than I had in years. The world hadn't changed, but I had. For once, I wasn't just Marcus's mother or Tiffany's mother-in-law. I was Charlotte Fitzgerald, a woman who had given everything and finally remembered she was worth something too. I reached across the small table between us and placed my hand gently over his. Marcus, I said softly, your father loved you deeply, but he also taught you something important, to always respect the people who love you, especially your family. Marcus nodded, eyes red and glistening. I know, Mom. I got so caught up in making everything perfect for Tiffany that I stopped thinking about how I was treating you. I let her words guide my actions instead of my heart. For a moment, silence filled the room again. I could hear the ticking of the old clock on the wall, the same one my husband had given me for our 20th anniversary. "Do you love Tiffany?" I asked gently. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "I do. But I realize now that loving her doesn't mean I have to let her disrespect you." "She's embarrassed, Mom. She told me she wishes she could take back what she said. She said she was stressed, afraid the wedding would fall apart, and she took it out on you." "Marcus," I said, leaning back in my chair, "stress doesn't excuse cruelty. What matters now is whether she truly understands that." He looked up at me, meeting my eyes for the first time. "She wants to come by tomorrow to apologize. She said she didn't realize how much she'd hurt you until she saw how everything fell apart without you there." I sighed softly, unsure how to respond. A part of me wanted to see her, to give her the chance to say sorry, but another part of me was still raw, still healing from the way she had spoken about me like I was disposable. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "I appreciate that she wants to apologize, but forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It takes time." He nodded. "I understand. And Mom, thank you for not coming to the wedding." I blinked in surprise. "Thank me?" "Yes," he said with a weak smile. "If you had come, nothing would have changed. Tiffany and I would have gone on thinking it was okay to take advantage of you. You made me see what kind of man I was becoming. You reminded me what respect really means." Tears welled in my eyes, not from sadness this time, but from relief. For the first time in years, I saw the boy I had raised, thoughtful, humble, and kind, sitting before me again. I squeezed his hand. "That means more to me than you can imagine, Marcus. I don't need perfection from you. I just need respect and love that comes without conditions." He nodded again quietly. "You'll always have both, Mom. I promise." We talked for another hour, not about the disaster of the wedding, but about memories, about his father, about how life changes, and how sometimes it takes a hard moment to remind us of what really matters. When he finally stood to leave, he hugged me tightly. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, son," I whispered. "And remember, love without respect isn't love at all." As the door closed behind him, I stood by the window watching him drive away. The sun was setting, bathing the neighborhood in a soft golden light. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a mother who had to be everything for everyone. I felt like a woman who had finally chosen herself and taught her son the most important lesson of all. Would you like me to continue with the next day's scene, when Tiffany comes to visit Charlotte to apologize? Voice cracked slightly. "Because I was jealous," she admitted, tears forming in her eyes. "You have the kind of grace and respect that I've never had. People listen to you, they care about what you say, and I was scared that Marcus would always compare me to you, that I'd never be enough." I let her words sink in. For years, I had assumed Tiffany's coldness came from arrogance or entitlement, not insecurity. Seeing her trembling hands and watery eyes made me realize that maybe, beneath all her pride, there was a scared young woman who simply didn't know how to love without competing. "Tiffany," I said calmly, "you could have told me that. You could have talked to me instead of turning me into your rival." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I know. I was stupid. I thought if I acted like I didn't need your help, I would seem stronger. But instead, I became cruel. And when I joked with Audrey about you watching the kids, it wasn't even about the wedding. It was about me trying to make myself feel powerful. I realize now that I just looked small." The honesty in her voice surprised me. I had prepared myself for excuses, not vulnerability. I leaned forward slightly. "Do you really understand why what you did hurt me, Tiffany?" It wasn't just that you wanted me to watch the children or help with the food. It was the way you assumed I would, without ever asking. You made me invisible. She looked up, her eyes filled with remorse. Yes, I understand. You're Marcus's mother, not our employee. You've done so much for both of us, and instead of being grateful, I treated you like a convenience. I'm ashamed. There was a long silence between us. I could hear the faint ticking of the same old clock that had watched over every important conversation in that house. Finally, I asked quietly, "And what do you want from me now, Tiffany?" "I want a chance to start over," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just want you to know that I'm truly sorry, not because Marcus told me to be, but because I finally see how wrong I was. I want to earn your respect, not demand your help." Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of sincerity. I could see it in her posture, the way she wasn't trying to defend herself anymore. After a moment, I nodded. "I appreciate your apology, Tiffany. It takes courage to face someone you've hurt. I won't lie, it will take me time to fully trust you again. But this," I gestured between us, "this conversation is a start." A small, grateful smile appeared on her face. "Thank you, Miss Charlotte." "You can call me Charlotte," I said softly, "but only when you mean it with respect." She nodded, almost relieved. "Yes, Charlotte." I stood up and offered her a cup of tea. For the first time since Marcus had married her, she accepted it with both hands, not as something she was owed, but as something she was offered. We sat together quietly for a few minutes, sipping tea and listening to the faint hum of life outside. It wasn't warmth yet, but it wasn't coldness either. It was something in between, fragile but real. When she stood to leave, she looked at me with genuine humility. "Thank you for giving me a chance. I'll do my best to deserve it." "I hope you do," I said gently. "Because Marcus deserves a wife who respects his mother, and you deserve a family that respects you. But both of those things begin with how we treat each other." She nodded again and walked to the door. As I watched her step out into the fading afternoon light, I felt a strange peace, not because everything was fixed, but because something had finally begun to heal. When the door closed, I sat back in my chair, feeling a quiet pride. I hadn't lost my son. I hadn't even lost my daughter-in-law. What I had lost, finally and thankfully, was my silence. Would you like me to continue with what happens later that evening, when Marcus returns to ask how the meeting went? Paused for a moment, not because I was angry, but because I was surprised. Marcus's tone wasn't entitled or expectant. It was respectful. He was asking, not telling. "Marcus," I said softly, "you don't have to pay me to help you decorate your wife's birthday party. I'll help because I want to, not because I have to." "Are you sure, Mom?" "I don't want you to feel used again," he replied, his voice laced with concern. "That depends on how much help you actually need." I teased lightly, and he laughed, a sound I hadn't heard from him in weeks. "Just a few hours tomorrow," he said. "I promise I've got everything else covered." The next day, when I arrived at the small venue, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Tiffany waiting for me at the door, smiling. Not the fake, polite smile she used to wear, but something real. "Miss Charlotte," she said warmly, "I'm so glad you came." She hugged me, awkwardly at first, but sincerely. Inside, I noticed the tables were already set, the caterers busy, and the decorations half done. "I saved the finishing touches for you," Tiffany said. "Marcus told me you have a magic touch with flowers." "Well, I've had a lot of practice making plain things look special," I said with a small grin. We worked side by side for a while. It was strange at first, the silence between us filled with the quiet sound of ribbon being tied and flowers being arranged. But it wasn't a tense silence. It was peaceful. After a while, Tiffany broke it. Miss Charlotte, I told Marcus about our talk. He cried. I stopped arranging the tulips. He did. Yes, she said softly. He said he didn't realize how much he had taken you for granted. He told me that from now on, we both need to do better, for you and for ourselves. I nodded, feeling something warm rise in my chest. That's all I ever wanted. Not money, not favors, just respect. When the guests arrived, Tiffany made a toast. She stood beside Marcus, holding his hand, and to my surprise, she called my name. I want to thank someone very special tonight, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Someone who reminded me what family really means, not by shouting or fighting, but by standing up for herself with grace and strength. Miss Charlotte, thank you for teaching me the value of respect and for giving me another chance. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. Everyone turned to me, applauding. I smiled, a real smile this time, and raised my glass. To learning, I said simply, and to treating each other with kindness before it's too late. After the party, as I walked home under the soft glow of the streetlights, I thought about how different everything felt. It wasn't perfect. Life never is. But there was a peace I hadn't felt in years. Maybe this was what growth looked like. Not grand gestures or apologies wrapped in money, but small, quiet changes that proved love could still find its way through the cracks of hurt. When I reached home, I poured myself a cup of tea, looked at my reflection in the window, and whispered, "You did the right thing, Charlotte. You taught them how to treat you, and you taught yourself how to be free." Would you like me to continue with a short epilogue showing what happens months later, for example, how their relationship truly evolves? Very painful to carry for so long. Losing a mother leaves a hole that nothing can truly fill. Tiffany nodded, her eyes glistening with quiet tears.
It was.
I didn't realize how much anger and grief I had buried. You reminded me of what I lost, but also what I could still have if I stopped pushing people away. I reached across the table and gently placed my hand on hers. Tiffany, healing takes time, but I'm proud of you for taking that step. It takes courage to face yourself that way. She smiled faintly. You know, my therapist said something that stayed with me. She said I was trying to earn love through control, because deep down I feared being unworthy of it. And I realized that's what I did with Marcus, and with you. I tried to control everything, including people, to feel safe. I sighed softly. I understand that, Tiffany. We all have our ways of protecting ourselves. But control and love can't live in the same space for long. Eventually, one suffocates the other. She nodded again, taking in every word. That's why I want to build something real with you, Miss Charlotte. Not out of guilt or obligation, but because I finally see your worth. Not as Marcus's mom, not as someone who helps, but as a person. A woman with her own life, her own story, her own dignity. Her sincerity reached me in a way that words rarely do. Tiffany, I believe you, I said quietly. And I'm willing to move forward, not forgetting the past, but learning from it. From that day on, things truly changed. Tiffany began visiting me on her own, sometimes for tea, sometimes just to talk. She'd ask about my life, my hobbies, my memories. She never once asked for favors again. One sunny afternoon, she brought me a framed photo from her wedding. It was the one where I was standing in the background, wearing my coral dress, the same one I had refused to ruin chasing after children. But now, across the bottom of the photo, she had written in elegant gold letters, "The woman who taught me the meaning of respect." I stared at it for a long moment, my throat tightening. "Tiffany, this is beautiful." "It's the least I could do," she said softly. "You deserve to be remembered that way. Not as the woman everyone tried to use, but as the one who refused to be used." I hung that picture in my living room, right beside an old photo of Marcus as a boy. Every time I looked at it, I didn't just see forgiveness or reconciliation. I saw proof that standing up for yourself can change more than just your own life. Months later, when Marcus and Tiffany announced they were expecting their first child, Tiffany called me herself. "Miss Charlotte," she said, "I'd love for you to be part of this baby's life. But only if you want to. No expectations, no obligations." I smiled through the phone, my heart warm. "Tiffany, that's the only way I'd want it." And when the baby was born, a little girl with her father's eyes and her mother's determined spirit, Tiffany asked me to hold her first. "She's going to know you as Grandma Charlotte," she said. "Not because we owe you anything, but because we honor you." As I cradled that tiny child in my arms, feeling the soft rise and fall of her breath, I realized something profound. Respect isn't demanded or begged for. It's earned, protected, and taught through example. And in that moment, surrounded by new life and old lessons, I knew that I had not only reclaimed my dignity, I had rewritten the legacy of what it meant to be a mother, and a woman who finally learned to stand tall. Would you like me to write a short emotional epilogue showing Charlotte's life a year later, her relationship with her granddaughter, and how time softens everything? To yourself. As I closed the last page of my speech that night, I looked around the room, at Marcus, standing proudly beside Tiffany, at Loretta, beaming at me from the front row, at the friends, neighbors, and strangers who had come to celebrate my story, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time: peace. The kind of peace that comes not from silence or surrender, but from finally being heard. After the guests left, Marcus hugged me tightly. "Mom, I hope you know how proud I am of you. You didn't just write a book, you changed the way I see you, the way I see people." I smiled, brushing a tear from his cheek.
No, son.
"I didn't change you. You changed yourself. I just stopped standing in the way of your lessons." A few months later, Tiffany gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, Emma. The first time I held her, her tiny fingers wrapped around mine, and I felt a warmth spread through me that words couldn't describe. Tiffany whispered softly, "Mom Charlotte, she already loves you." And for the first time, that name, Mom Charlotte, didn't feel like a title or a compromise. It felt earned. Now, every Sunday morning, I sit by my window with a cup of tea, writing new recipes and jotting little notes for Emma to read one day. Notes that say things like, "Kindness doesn't mean weakness," and "Love yourself enough to set boundaries." Because that's what I want her to learn, that love and dignity can and must coexist. Sometimes, when the light hits the framed photo from Tiffany's birthday, the one that reads, "The woman who taught me the meaning of respect," I smile. Not because I won or proved anyone wrong, but because I finally lived the truth that had taken me 72 years to learn. You can give, serve, and love deeply, but never at the cost of your own worth. And sometimes, the most loving word you'll ever say is no. The months that followed were the calmest of my entire life. Every morning, I woke up with a quiet sense of purpose, not because someone was waiting for me to fix their problems, but because I finally had my own. My book began to sell modestly online, and sometimes, strangers would write to me saying how my story had reminded them to reclaim their self-respect. One message said, "Miss Charlotte, you helped me say no to my daughter for the first time in years." I cried, but I finally slept peacefully that night. Those words meant more to me than any award ever could. Marcus and Tiffany were true to their word. They never assumed, never demanded. They asked. They listened. And when I said no, which I still did, sometimes, they smiled and said, "That's okay, Mom Charlotte. We understand." One evening, As I sat on my porch watching the sunset, Tiffany joined me with baby Emma in her arms. The little one was giggling, clutching a wooden spoon from my kitchen. Tiffany laughed. "She's obsessed with your cooking utensils, Mom Charlotte. I think we have a future chef here." I took Emma into my arms and said softly, "Maybe one day, she'll cook something from my book." Tiffany looked at me, her eyes tender. I used to think love meant saying yes all the time. You showed me that love is sometimes saying no and meaning it." I smiled. "Boundaries don't build walls, Tiffany. They build respect. And respect makes love last." She nodded. "You were right that day, the day of the wedding. You taught us something we'll never forget." We sat in silence for a while, the baby cooing between us, the air filled with the scent of blooming jasmine. The same garden that once looked neglected was now full of color, just like my life. Later that night, I wrote the final entry in my journal. I used to think my greatest role was being a mother who gave everything. Now I know it's being a woman who knew when to stop giving, so her love could mean something again. When I closed the book, I felt complete. And though time would eventually fade faces, voices, and moments, one truth would remain eternal. Dignity, once reclaimed, never leaves you again. The years rolled gently onward, carrying with them the peace I had fought so hard to earn. My book found its quiet corner in local shops, and every now and then, I'd receive an invitation to speak at community gatherings, small groups of women, many my age, who'd spent a lifetime giving until there was nothing left for themselves. They would come up to me afterward, tears shining in their eyes, and whisper, *, "You said what I never could." *. Each time, I would smile and tell them the truth. It's never too late to say no, and it's never too late to start living for yourself. Marcus became a more thoughtful man, more patient. He and Tiffany learned that a strong marriage isn't built on convenience, but on shared respect. When baby Emma grew into a curious toddler, she'd run to me shouting, "Grandma Charlotte," and I'd scoop her up, the sound of her laughter echoing through the house like a second youth. Sometimes, Tiffany would join me in the kitchen, helping me bake the same pies her husband loved as a boy. She'd ask questions about my recipes, but more often, she'd ask about life. "How did you stay strong when you felt unappreciated?" she once asked. I answered simply, "Because I finally realized that love without respect isn't love, it's duty." As the seasons passed, I watched my garden bloom again. The same soil that had once felt like a burden to tend became a source of calm. The flowers seemed to thank me each morning, their petals open and unafraid. On my 75th birthday, Marcus surprised me with something I'll never forget. He stood up during dinner, holding a small framed photo, the cover of my book. Beneath it, he had written, "To the woman who taught us that saying no is not rejection, it's self-respect." Everyone raised their glasses, even Tiffany, who looked at me with genuine warmth. In that moment, surrounded by laughter and love that finally felt equal, I realized that the legacy I was leaving behind wasn't just recipes or family stories. It was a lesson carved deep into the hearts of the people I loved. That kindness is a gift, not an obligation. That boundaries protect love, they don't destroy it. And that sometimes the strongest act of love a woman can make is choosing herself. Would you like me to write an epilogue, a short, emotional, years later scene that shows Charlotte reflecting on her life as an older woman, looking back with peace and wisdom, perfect as a final scene or story outro? Years later, long after the chaos of weddings and apologies had faded into soft memories, Charlotte sat on her porch one spring afternoon, the same porch where, years ago, she had first overheard the words that changed everything. The air was filled with the scent of lilacs and the laughter of her granddaughter, Emma. echoed from the garden. Emma was 10 now, all energy and curiosity, her dark curls bouncing as she chased butterflies between the rows of tulips. Tiffany sat nearby, reading a book while Marcus tended the grill, an image of calm and family harmony that would have been impossible to imagine all those years ago. Charlotte smiled as she watched them. Her heart no longer carried the weight of old wounds. The boundaries she had once been so afraid to draw had, in time, become the invisible lines that held her family together. "Grandma," Emma called, running up to her with a small flower crown she'd made herself. "You have to wear this. You're the queen of the garden." Charlotte laughed softly as Emma placed the crown on her head. "Queen of the garden, huh? I think I like that title." Tiffany looked up from her book and smiled. "You are the queen, Mom Charlotte. You taught us how to grow this family, right?" Charlotte's eyes softened.
No, sweetheart.
"You all did that yourselves. I just planted a few seeds." Marcus joined them, wiping his hands on a towel. "You planted more than that, Mom. You changed the way we treat each other. You made us understand what real respect looks like." Charlotte took his hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "That's all I ever wanted, son. For love to never mean losing yourself." As the sun began to set, the sky painted in strokes of orange and gold, Charlotte closed her eyes and breathed deeply. She could hear the soft hum of cicadas, the clinking of plates, the rustle of leaves in the warm evening breeze, the simple music of a life finally at peace. She thought of her younger self, the woman who once stayed silent to keep the peace, who gave and gave until there was nothing left for herself. That woman had been brave too, in her own way. But the woman she had become was something more. She was whole. "Grandma," Emma said suddenly, tugging on her hand, "when I grow up, I want to be just like you." Charlotte opened her eyes and smiled. "Then promise me one thing, darling." "What's that?" "Promise me you'll never be afraid to say no when your heart says no, and never forget to say yes when your soul says yes." Emma nodded solemnly, as if she understood something important. And maybe, in her own young way, she did. That night, after everyone had gone home and the garden was quiet again, Charlotte sat by her window, looking out at the moonlit flowers. Her book sat open on the table beside her, a cup of tea cooling next to it. She whispered softly to herself, a smile curving her lips. Sometimes saying no is how life finally says yes back. And with that, Charlotte leaned back in her chair, her heart full, her soul light, the matriarch of a family built not on obligation, but on love freely given and deeply earned. And so, Charlotte's story came to rest like the final note of a long, beautiful song. She had walked through loneliness, disappointment, and quiet heartbreak, yet she emerged with something far greater than comfort: peace. The kind of peace that comes when a woman finally understands her worth, not as a caretaker, but as a whole, living soul. Her book continued to inspire others, her garden kept blooming year after year, and her family, once fragile, now stood strong on the foundation of respect she had quietly built. Charlotte never sought to be remembered as perfect. She only hoped to be remembered as honest, a woman who learned, even late in life, that love without boundaries is not love at all, but surrender. And in the end, surrounded by laughter, lilacs, and the warmth of those who truly saw her, Charlotte knew she had lived exactly the life she was meant to live. Because sometimes the greatest love story isn't the one you find with someone else. It's the one you finally find with yourself.
Dizzy.